Tsavo Reserve, midday. A lion steps from the thorn brush into the open, his flank sunken and streaked with dust. His front paw lands firm, but the rear follows unevenly. Each motion carries weight he no longer has. The ribs along his side shift too visibly with each breath. There is no roar, no sound at all, only the dry slap of pads against cracked earth as he limps across the flatland, drawn forward by instinct more than direction. The wind moves lightly through the acacia, but he does not turn toward it. His head sways once and then settles forward again. A bone shows at the joint above his leg. His eyes blink slowly, not with caution, but with the heaviness of something too depleted to fear. The flies follow him now, gathering along the back of his neck. He flicks once, then not again. Elias watches from a parked survey truck less than 30 meters away. He doesn't reach for the radio. He doesn't move at all. His eyes stay locked on the lion as it continues forward with halting steps. A brief tremor passes through its haunches before it stops. The pause lasts only a moment before the lion veers, not sharply, just enough to suggest he no longer knows where he meant to go. When the lion finally drops, it's not dramatic. He folds down slowly, like something sinking back into earth. First the front legs, then the side, the shoulder slumping with a faint exhale. There is no cry, no protest. Only stillness. Elias steps from the vehicle after several minutes. He keeps a wide arc, not rushing, not calling. His boots crack the soil with each slow step. The lion doesn't rise. Don't watch him. That is its own danger. A lion that doesn't watch a man is not a lion choosing peace. It's a lion that no longer has the strength to choose anything. He kneels down just close enough to see the rise of the chest. It's shallow. The breath pauses between cycles, as if the body needs to remember each time. From this angle he sees the scars, old ones mostly. A wide line across the ribs, healed over but jagged. Another near the base of the tail, but it's the color of the gums, barely visible when the lion's jaw shifts open slightly that tells Elias the rest. He's not just thin, he's starving. Elias stands slowly and walks back to the truck. He doesn't call for extraction. There's nothing to extract yet. He just radios in a quiet line. One male, adult. Not stable. South track near Ridge Post. Staying with him. If the lion tries to move again, he could collapse fully. If spooked, he could run and bleed out in the heat. But if left alone, without shade, without water, he'll die before nightfall. Back at the truck, Elias pulls a canteen and a loose cloth from the kit bag. He walks the same arc again, slow, curved, and non-threatening. The lion lifts his head a few inches at the sound, but lets it fall again. Elias crouches 10 paces away and pours the water onto the cloth, wringing it once. He lays the damp cloth in the dust between them. Not closer, just close enough for scent to carry. The lion sniffs, or maybe just breathes. Then, nothing. Elias backs away slowly, dust rising with each step. He doesn't speak. There's no point in that now. Instead, he sits beside the front wheel and waits, eyes fixed on the still body lying just beyond the reach of his shadow. If the lion moves again, they'll act. If he doesn't, they'll watch him slip. Nothing is guaranteed now. The only thing certain is the heat, the silence, and the slow tick of breath. Still coming, but not for long. The lion didn't rise when the shadows stretched long across the dust. Hours passed beneath the flat sun, and still he lay in the same position. Head low, side turned, limbs slack in the heat. A few times his ribs lifted sharply as if he might stir, but they fell again with no follow-through. No sound came from him. Not even a tail flick. By late afternoon, a second ranger arrived. Lamech, one of the older staff from the northern edge of the reserve. He parked behind Elias without speaking, stepping out with slow care. Elias nodded once. They stood in silence, both men watching the rise and fall of the lion's side. Shallow, uncertain. The breaths came now like afterthoughts. Neither of them suggested moving him. That wasn't possible. Any rope, any stretch of movement, would tear the muscles too thin to hold together. And sedation wasn't safe in this state. His body couldn't bear a chemical push, so they waited. Elias stepped forward again, crouching just close enough to see the lion's jaw tremble slightly at the scent of new sweat. There was no growl, no eye movement, but the nostrils flared once. That was enough. He poured more water from his canteen into the cloth and laid it out again. Then closer, 6 paces now. Still no reaction, but still breathing. Lamech walked to the truck, returning with a second bottle and a small tin of rehydration mix. They stirred it gently into the water, keeping the cloth soaked and cool. Elias held it closer now, not to the lion's mouth, but near his nose. The cloth dripped into the dust slowly, leaving damp marks between them. The lion's ears didn't twitch. His flank rose again, shallow and uneven. But then something changed. A twitch, not much, just a shift in the paw. Then a brief shudder through the front leg. Elias didn't move. He stayed kneeling, one hand steady in the dirt. If the lion moved sharply, they'd back away. If he tried to rise too soon, his body might seize. But if he stayed like this, limp, unresponsive, the night would close over him before anything else could. Lamech lowered himself down slowly beside a thorn stump, not speaking. "We have to choose," he said after a long pause. His voice was soft. "If we try fluids now, we risk shock. If we wait, we lose him." Elias didn't answer right away. He watched the breath again. 3 seconds between, then 4, then 3 again. He reached forward and set the damp cloth on the lion's foreleg. Not to force it, just to leave it. The warmth of the skin was still there, but only just. He whispered a word. Not a command, not a name, just something shaped like encouragement. The lion didn't move again. They stepped back slowly. Give space. If he responded, it would be in his own time. If he didn't, the sun would set within the hour, and the cold would do the rest. For now, the only certainty was the cloth on the lion's leg, the water slowly drying in the dust, and 2 men who would not leave until either the breath stopped or the eyes opened. By early evening, the decision was made. They wouldn't move him. No transport, no stretcher, no tranquilizer. Just presence. Just waiting. The risk of intervention was too high. So they brought what they could instead: a foldable canopy for shade, a shallow dish for water, and a thermal blanket they spread in the dry dust nearby. Not to touch him, just to be ready. The field station took shape slowly, built not from urgency but restraint. No engine noise, no shouting, no clicks of equipment. Elias adjusted each item by hand, pausing every few minutes to glance back toward the lion. Still no movement beyond breath. The eyes remained half-lidded. The tail stayed still. But he hadn't slipped away. Not yet. Lamech left near sunset, walking the full path back to the ridge post to avoid any disturbance by vehicle. Elias remained. He laid out a small tarp beside the front wheel and sat cross-legged in the dust, his rifle leaned out of reach, his canteen placed within arm's length of the water pan. The lion was just 20 meters away now. Not guarded, not caged, just watched. A few times in the growing dusk, Elias thought he saw a flicker of movement. The twitch of a paw, a faint lift of the neck, but nothing sustained. The lion's breath came in thin stretches, barely rippling the flies that hovered near his ear. The food bowl remained untouched. The soaked cloth had dried now, crusted slightly with salt. Night descended without change. The horizon dimmed. Cicadas began their low call. Somewhere far off a hyena gave a long, strange cry. But near the field station there was only quiet. The lion did not rise. Elias didn't sleep. He rested in stillness, rising now and then to refill the pan with water, shifting the basin's edge slightly closer in case the lion stirred. But he didn't force it. He just remained present. By midnight, the air cooled sharply. Elias wrapped his jacket tighter. He could hear his own breath more than the lion's. The stillness had become fragile. If the lion rose suddenly and fled into the dark, it would mean death. He'd collapse before morning. If he stayed, maybe, just maybe, there was a chance. Around 3 a.m., there was a change. Not a sound, a shape. The lion's neck lifted, only slightly. The head didn't rise, but the ears twitched once, then again. A moment later, the tail dragged across the dust by just a few inches. Elias didn't move, didn't even breathe fully. It was not a recovery, but it was a response. At dawn, the first light touched the flat. Elias stood slowly, stretching one leg at a time to avoid startling him. The lion lay in the same place, eyes still closed, but the water dish showed signs of disturbance. A faint splash line, a single print near the edge. That was enough. He had chosen to stay. If he changed his mind and ran, he would not survive. But if he trusted again tonight, even a little, there was now a path forward. Nothing certain, nothing easy, but real. The choice had been his, to flee or to remain. And in the cold silence of night, against all instinct, the lion had not left. Morning settled over the reserve in pale light and windless calm. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the sky had turned from silver to soft ochre. Elias stepped carefully across the dust, his boots moving with the same patience he'd kept since the night before. The lion hadn't shifted much. His body lay angled toward the water dish, one paw extended as if mid-motion and abandoned halfway. Elias stopped a few paces away, lowering himself into the dirt. He said nothing. No sound had passed between them in hours, and none was needed now. The lion's eyes remained half shut, but his ears flicked once in acknowledgement. Small, subtle, but there. Only now, with the sun at this angle and the lion turned slightly from his original posture, did Elias see the line across the upper shoulder. A faded scar that curved downward, almost like a hook pressed into flesh and pulled away. It wasn't fresh, no swelling, no open tissue, but the skin along it looked thinner, smoother than the rest. He recognized that shape. Not a fight, not a fall. A snare. Months old, maybe more. The kind that closes behind the leg and cinches until the body gives out. The lion had survived it. Somehow pulled free or broken the tether. But the damage had lasted far longer than the wound itself. The muscles around the shoulder were wasted. The leg beneath trembled in stillness. Elias leaned forward slightly, the movement slow, intentional. He rolled his sleeve up to the elbow and held out his left arm, not toward the lion, not close, just into the light. A scar, long and pale, ran from wrist to mid-forearm. Years ago. A buffalo goring, he'd been told lucky to keep the limb. He hadn't looked at it often since, but now he let the morning show it plainly. There was no message in the gesture, no comparison to offer, just one scar visible to another. One proof of damage carried quietly in the body long after the wound itself had closed. The lion shifted. His nose drew in a deeper breath. Not alarm, just the gathering of scent. He didn't move his legs, didn't growl, but his eyes opened for the first time that day. Fully, if only briefly. Golden, dulled by fatigue, but open. They passed over Elias, then closed again. Elias exhaled, quiet. He dipped the cloth again in water and laid it near the front paw. This time, he saw the faint lift of a toe, the twitch of a pad curling. Just reflex, but more than before. He stood and stepped back to the tarp. A few birds passed overhead, The heat would return soon. Lemmick was due back by midday with soft rations, egg protein mix, safe for starvation cases. But for now, it was still just the two of them. The scar on the lion's shoulder told a story no one had heard. A trap survived, a flight endured, a cost paid in strength and mobility. That wound had closed. But the hunger, the weakness, the days without food that followed, those were the real damage. And yet, he had come here. Collapsed, yes, but not dead. He had followed scent or memory or instinct long enough to land near human presence without fear. That, too, meant something. If he had stayed away, he would have faded in silence. But he had come close. And in return, Elias stayed closer still. Dawn came without sound. No wind stirred the trees along the edge of the flat, and even the insects seemed slower than usual. The light, faint and colorless at first, crept gently over the edge of the reserve, touching the earth before the sky had fully changed. Elias sat upright beside the supply tarp, his knees drawn up, jacket pulled close. He hadn't slept. Not fully, just drifted now and then in a shallow rhythm of alertness. Across the short stretch of ground, the lion lay as he had the evening before, stretched, still his chest lifting in soft intervals. Then, without warning, a shift. Subtle. A rear leg pushed slightly against the dirt, dragging in half a circle. The head rose, not fully, but with purpose. Then the neck. One breath, then another, and then the foreleg moved. Forward, one short motion, paw pressing into the ground. Elias stayed where he was, still, watching. The lion's body trembled through the movement, muscles firing unevenly beneath the skin. He paused halfway, shoulder twitching as though uncertain of direction. Then he lowered his head, sniffed once toward the earth, and pulled himself another foot. The food bowl sat just beside the water dish. Shallow, soft rice soaked in hydration mix and crushed protein. Nothing strong, nothing rich, just calories. The lion's nose touched the edge. He paused. Then, carefully, he opened his mouth and pulled a small mouthful into his jaws. There was no sound, no chewing, just swallowing. Another pause. A breath. Then again. Elias whispered, barely above breath, "Good." The lion didn't respond. He didn't need to. There was no growl, no urgency in the way he ate, no desperation. Just small bites, deliberate and slow. A body that remembered how to feed, even after forgetting how to ask for it. The birds came next, a soft flurry of calls from above. Vultures, drawn by scent and habit, circled the ridgeline. But the lion did not look up. He stayed fixed on the bowl, taking in what he could. Elias stood slowly, not approaching but stepping a few paces back toward the vehicle. He didn't want to be closer now. The lion didn't need company. Just quiet. Just space. After several minutes, the lion stopped. His chest heaved slightly, not from effort, but from the unfamiliar fullness in his stomach. He turned slightly, paws folding beneath him, head still held upright. It was the first time he had sat with his weight forward in days. He didn't lie down again, not yet. He watched the ground. Then the bowl. Then nothing. For now, that was enough. If he moved too fast, the food could turn in his gut. If he stood fully, he might collapse. But if he stayed as he was, calm, slow, rooted, he might recover strength one small act at a time. The birds above continued their spiral, uncertain now. What had seemed near death an hour ago no longer lay still. Elias crouched beside the rear tire of the truck, arms resting across his knees. He didn't smile, but something in his shoulders softened. The lion had eaten, not everything, but enough. And, most importantly, he had not left. 2 mornings later, the wind changed. It carried a scent different from the dust and leaf rot that usually hung over the southern flats. Elias noticed it first, faint but certain. Not decay, not smoke, but animal, alive, moving, from higher ground. He was restocking the water pan when he caught the shift in the air and turned toward the ridge. A shape stood still against the light, not broad enough for a mature male, not lean like a hyena. The body moved low, deliberate, a lion, younger. The newcomer stepped with care down the slope, not in a hunting crouch, not fast, but attentive. His ribs were sharper than the first, the fur patchy along the spine. He paused halfway, sniffed the air again, and stared directly toward the tarp and feeding bowl. Then further, to the older lion lying beside the brush line. The older lion lifted his head. Just that. He didn't rise, didn't growl. His ears tilted slightly and his eyes held steady. Recognition lived in that stillness, though no sound passed between them. Elias didn't move. He stepped once behind the truck and stood quietly, half in shadow, hands at his sides. He watched the younger lion descend fully now, reaching the edge of the clearing with slow steps. The tension never rose. No low sounds. No raised fur. The older lion blinked, then shifted his weight, allowing his body to tilt slightly toward the approach, a gesture neither submissive nor dominant, just open. The younger male stopped 3 paces away. His body language held no threat. Head lowered, tail still. He looked at the water, then at the lion beside it, and finally turned in a slow circle before lying down. No contact, no movement closer, but side by side now. Elias exhaled, barely aware he'd been holding the breath. There were no collars, no tags. These weren't known lions from the collared pride groups up north. They'd come from elsewhere, perhaps scattered after a dry season or displaced by a rival male. Maybe siblings, maybe not. But what was clear now, as they lay near each other in quiet, was something shared, a memory of closeness. Later that afternoon, the younger lion crept forward and drank, not fast, but with hunger that hadn't dulled yet. The older lion didn't move. He just watched. The food wasn't touched that day. But the water went quickly. By evening, both lions lay beneath the partial shade of the brush, heads turned outward, bodies aligned but not touching. When the light dropped behind the ridge, the younger lion gave a single short exhale. Not a huff, not a warning. The older responded with nothing more than a shift in breathing. A bond had formed long before this meeting, or perhaps had never broken. It wasn't made of noise or dominance or anything humans could name. It simply was. Elias didn't step closer that night. He left 2 bowls instead of 1 and built a wider arc of shade from the supply canvas. He didn't speak, didn't label what he saw. 2 lions, 1 barely surviving, 1 arriving thinner still, and between them the shared space of quiet understanding. No conflict, no roar, just the soft sound of 2 heartbeats settling into the earth, side by side. The morning broke gently, with low light pooling across the dry basin where the 2 lions rested. Neither had moved much through the night. Their bodies lay apart but in rhythm. Heads aligned, breath rising in slow intervals, tails curled toward the dust. Elias sat a short distance away, arms folded loosely, eyes fixed not on what they did, but what they didn't. No growl, no shift in rank, no hunger-driven push. By mid-morning, Lamech returned with additional feed, soft-cooked chicken and vitamin paste prepared at the mobile clinic. He approached without speaking, pausing when he saw the new lion. The look on his face was brief, unreadable. Then he simply set the container down and stepped back. They didn't ask who the younger lion was. The answer had already begun to show, in posture, in stillness, in the way the older lion turned his head slightly when the other stirred, not to monitor, but to acknowledge. The younger lion stood first. His legs trembled under his weight, but he held them. He sniffed the feed lightly, then began to eat. It wasn't frantic. He took only what he needed. Each bite came with a pause, as if allowing his body to decide it could handle more. The older lion watched with no response. Not once did he shift forward, claim the bowl, or assert himself. He'd already eaten early that morning, a small meal before sunrise. That seemed enough. Elias crouched low beside the tire well. His voice barely audible, he muttered, "Brothers, maybe." Lamech didn't answer. He simply nodded once and sat down in the dirt beside a pile of coiled rope they hadn't needed. Looking at them now, it was hard to miss the resemblance. Not perfect, but close. Similar builds, same ridge of fur along the spine, same pale spots near the eye sockets. One aged by injury, the other by hunger. Different scars, same silence. It wasn't unusual for males from the same litter to disperse under pressure. Territories shifted. Droughts scattered herds. One might join a small bachelor group, another might survive alone on scraps. But the way these two moved, not as strangers, not as rivals, told another story. They had known each other once. That much was certain. The younger lion finished half the meal before stepping back. He didn't collapse this time. He sat, upright, alert, ribs still showing but posture returning. For a moment, the older lion turned his head toward him and let it rest there, not quite eye to eye, but close enough. They held the space like it was something sacred. No sound passed between them. Just breathe. Elias stood and walked back to the tarp, not needing to see more. He felt the shift. Two lions who had suffered separately now found each other again. Not in strength, but in weakness. And that, somehow, had made room for peace. The men didn't speak the rest of the day. They worked quietly, cleaning bowls, resetting shade poles, and logging signs of recovery in short pencil strokes. But every few minutes their eyes drifted back toward the lions, still together, still silent. What they shared could not be charted. It could only be witnessed. And it was. Dusk settled without warning, brushing the edge of the plain in muted orange. The heat had eased and the reserve stood quiet. No trucks, no radios, no other movement besides the slow turn of wind across the dry grass. The two lions had slept through most of the afternoon side by side but not touching, as if closeness no longer required physical contact. They had eaten small meals, drank from the same basin, and moved in short, economical shifts, but they hadn't tested the distance between them. It was a peace that didn't ask to be spoken. Elias remained near the truck, crouched with his arms resting over his knees, eyes following the smallest changes in posture. He had said little all day. Lamech had returned briefly with a fresh container of food and more clothes. But even he had sensed something nearing its end. Not the end of care, not the end of breath, but the end of need. These lions were no longer waiting to be helped. They were choosing. The wind changed direction around the time the first star appeared. It brushed over the tarp, lifted dust into the sky, and carried the last smell of meat eastward. The older lion stirred first. It wasn't dramatic. His body tensed under the shoulder. Then shifted forward with the slow care of something testing strength long forgotten. His front paw pressed into the ground, then the other. He didn't shake. He didn't fall. He rose. Elias stayed still. He watched the rise like one watches the first signs of rain and drought. Quietly, reverently. The lion stood fully now, head up, ribs still showing but posture restored. His gaze didn't turn toward the bowls or the water. It moved forward, toward the open line of trees that bordered the plain. He stepped once, then again, not fast, not with any flourish, just a clean, clear movement, forward. The younger lion followed, a breath behind. His stride was narrower, his shoulders sharper with age or hunger, but he matched the steps exactly. He didn't wait for a signal. He didn't look back at the men or at the sight that had sustained them. He followed because that was what he had come to do. Together, they crossed the dirt road in silence. The earth had softened from last night's condensation, and their paw prints pressed clean into the dust. The older lions were heavier, with a slight drag at the heel, the younger's tight, aligned even. Elias rose slowly to his feet, stepping forward just far enough to see the trail they left. 2 sets of tracks, not one. They passed through the dry brush without hesitation. The grass, gold in the fading light, rose around their shoulders. As they neared the edge of the clearing, the older lion paused, not to wait, not to pose, but to breathe. The younger one drew close. Then, side by side, they walked on. Lamech stood beside Elias now, arms crossed loosely, eyes squinting toward the horizon. Neither man spoke. There was nothing to say. They had seen something few ever did. Not just survival, but reunion. Not just recovery, but return. The bowls sat untouched behind them. The water pan would be emptied by nightbirds or wind. The tarp would come down in the morning. What mattered had already left. By the time the sun dipped fully below the ridge, the lions had vanished from view. No calls followed. No signs lingered but the footprints across the road and a faint ripple in the tall grass. The field lay open again, bare and ordinary as if nothing had ever happened. But Elias would remember the sound of that silence. The quiet trust of one lion who had nothing left, and another who arrived not as a rival, but as a brother. And for a long time, the road held their trail in perfect clarity. 2 paths aligned. Then, as the first wind rose, the dust began to close them gently, grain by grain, as if the earth too understood that some endings are not meant to last, only to be witnessed.